Hello, I'm Glenn McGuinness, and welcome to a brand new season of Outburst. This week, Canadians are divided on some of this country's top priorities.
I think environment should be the number one priority because we've seen this summer the climate is burning.
I think the economy is number one.
NAFTA and trade, number one. How do we get our pipeline access? How do we get market access for our energy?
Taking care of people's needs rather than the needs of business.
It's about the people. It's time for them to go and vote.
From energy to the economy to U.S. relations, Canada's key priorities seem to be on a collision course. The tension is political and personal.
I'm Jen Gerson in Calgary. Ever since the Federal Court of Appeal quashed the regulatory go-ahead for the Trans Mountain expansion, the oil patch has been furious.
The government we have now federally is not exactly representing the West the way it should.
But it's not the only national priority having a personal impact here.
Well, you have to protect the land, and also too with the oil spills I've seen, they do a lot of it's quite devastating on the environment to see oil and salt water come out of the ground.
What's most important for the country has proven most damaging to this project: Canada's duty to consult First Nations. My story on the promise of reconciliation and the other priorities in its way, coming up.
Politics is personal, and your values, concerns, and ambitions all result in a single vote and rest in the hands of your elected MP. But whose voices will be left behind and whose will be up front? As summer ends and a session begins, it's your turn. Our question: what should be Parliament's top priority this year?
We need to get that pipeline in, but at the same time, I think we need to work on our social infrastructure, definitely. I think there's a lot of kids falling out of the system at the moment.
Get their act together on the energy side of the business of the country and pipelines and stuff like that.
Investing in climate change, global warming, I suppose.
Jobs, followed by truth and reconciliation.
Bringing down the deficit.
All things health involved. They need to do better at spending the money that they have.
What happened is that Trudeau helped a lot the refugees. Now he have to care more about the Canadian citizens.
I don't know, more infrastructure, city infrastructure. I don't know about federal, but transit is a big issue here, I think. Like public transportation, that kind of thing.
That's what impacts you?
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Certainly there are a lot of people in need of food and shelter, and I think that should be one of our number one concerns. I think there has been a lot of attention given lately towards the legalization of marijuana, and I'm not entirely sure, just given the nature of that entire issue, whether it should be a priority or not.
Well, the legalization of the weed, they should really see what they're going to do about it and legalize it and make sure that everything will go good.
I think to reevaluate what's Canada's position in local and foreign markets. Basically, either I think with a lot of happening everywhere in the world, we just should solidify our position as a country of peace.
The number one priority for Parliament should be getting out to the West and talking so that people hear what the Liberals have to say. We've got some great ideas, and nothing happens west of Toronto. So I guess in Vancouver, but it's like the prairies don't exist. So I'd love to see a little more attention paid to Alberta. And just talk us up, because we're out there and we're interested.
Education is the first priority in the country and for the province too. The economy and the environment too. I think Quebec is very in advance on that topic with the electricity, for instance, and I think it's the future of the country, maybe to make the priority the environment.
I believe in reconciliation because I try to live it. And I think that foundation of the treaties and the relationship that we're supposed to have as settlers with First Nations I think it's a top priority for me, and I think it should be for Canadians and the government. My name is Joey Podlubny. I'm a documentary photographer, and I like to explore things that I don't know much about, I've been on every operating SAGD site up north here and every operating mine, and I've traveled across Canada documenting industry and resource extraction. I've seen lots of injustices and I've seen lots of compromises. I've witnessed industry leading by example of what reconciliation looks like, and I've also seen industry, doing the minimum requirements that the government has set forward. It's their land the industry is operating on, and so if you're going to walk into somebody's backyard, you should talk to them first. That's my opinion. Chief Martin Louis, he's a Dene. They're the frog people, and he told me, he said, well, yeah, he goes, our grandfathers told us not to let the big black snake through our land. And he said, that's all I need to know. He told me that the Dene people are on this earth to protect the earth for everybody, for future generations. And so it led me to lots of different reserves. And then one of the chiefs, Chief Vern Janvier from Chippewa Prairie, he liked what I was doing, and he asked me to come up in 2013 to photograph their Dene Days, which was a cultural celebration. And then ever since then, I was hooked because they welcomed me in their community and they allowed me to explore as a non-Indigenous person and learn and grow. And so through all of those experiences and ceremonies and being in protests and in the council chambers and out in the bush with elders, I learned the pathway. Actually, is the interesting part is I went to discover about First Nations and I ended up discovering more about myself as a human being.
The government's priorities start with you, whether it's voting at a party's policy convention or on election day, writing letters or marching in protest. You help decide what matters when Parliament is in session. Once elected, the priorities are set by Cabinet. 34 ministers and the Prime Minister. Each minister is given a list of priorities heavily guided by the election platform their party ran on. The Cabinet must discuss, debate, and ultimately agree on what matters most to the country and how to achieve it. The Privy Council's office manages these discussions, gives policy advice, informs the Prime Minister of public opinion, and finds consensus. Ministers are also grouped into committees, which further reflect the government's priorities. In 2018, these include Canada-US relations, reconciliation, growing the middle class, and the environment. But gun violence, trade disputes, court decisions, even forest fires can move these issues up and down on the list. And regional priorities, especially with an election looming and votes on the line, can matter a great deal. One example is the increase in gun violence in Toronto and Montreal. The latter city has been calling for a national ban on handguns. But does this issue resonate outside of those big cities?
This is too important. Any life lost is a tragedy, whether it's here or in Thunder Bay or wherever, it doesn't matter. So it's important right across the country.
There is some speculation amongst many firearm owners that efforts are being made to take property, legally owned property from people without justification, which is the last thing that our leaders should be thinking about doing, but they're thinking about it.
It's multi-layered. It isn't just the gun, it's why did the person pick up the gun in the first place. You weren't born thinking, and your goals in life aren't going to be, when I grow up, I want to pick up a gun and kill someone.
How should the federal government set priorities for the country?
Like, you can't have two major things, like the economy versus the environment. You can't prioritize one over the other because ultimately we need both. So I think there needs to be a more flexible balance in that, but...
Yeah. Sure.
I think it's important for when they're prioritizing different things that they need to take into account two things, one being population and one being different settings for different people. So for example, if someone just prioritized population entirely, you'd have places that are metropolitan like Toronto, Ottawa, Vancouver, they'd be making all the decisions, which might have different impacts as opposed to if you just prioritize different areas of the country. So if you just did population, places like PEI, Nova Scotia wouldn't have as much, say in the decisions. but I think it's important that you have a balance of different partitions of the country as well as populations, so you get a good idea of what people in different places want.
They should consider the popular vote. I think a referendum on a lot of the important issues, like things like the oil sand or those that oil line down to the east coast or whatever, would be a way of doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you think that's the proper way to set priorities, is through a referendum?
Not all the time, but there's certain issues. But I mean, you have to set priorities, I think, on the economy, obviously, right, like you stated, more so than maybe even the environmental issues. We can sacrifice some for the other and back and forth.
Firstly, I think health and education should be right up near the top. Then you look at sort of the environmental factors and how the above two affect the environment. And then basically economic things come into it. But I think health and education often get neglected in Australia, so that's something that our federal government needs to prioritise a little more highly than they do.
Do you think with health and education everything's sure to follow?
Not necessarily, but I think if you look after the welfare of your citizens, well then everything else should improve in terms of productivity. If you've got a healthier workforce, less people sort of on sickness benefits, and a more educated society, then we don't have to bring in so many foreign trained workers as we do. So
the government should really set the priorities for the people, and I think they really should see what they should, like with the Trudeau government, they promised a lot of stuff but they haven't really delivered yet. So I think they really need to refocus and honestly Parliament and reset that agenda.
I think they should always listen to the voice of the people, because usually people I really enjoyed in the beginning of the current federal government, they sent out a survey of what they hope to see in the budget or what they hope to see, what policies they make, and I like to see them take the opinions of the people and at the same time take what has studies have shown. So what has studies because people have done studies over.
It's a loud truck.
Yes, it is. I would like them to take three aspects, which is one, what's good for the country that historically that they have seen has worked and what not worked, but at the same time what the people want. And at the third thing would be what has research or studies have shown what should be done and what to be done improve, so that works for the environment and for the world.
Talk to your MP. Your MP would take that to Parliament when he votes, I guess. Right. That's all you really can do once you have a member of Parliament already elected.
I think ensuring that they have really strong ministers in a cabinet and that are really representative of the different areas. It's hard to gauge a survey of absolutely everybody across the country. You could do that to a certain extent. I think that is helpful. But I feel like having strong, knowledgeable, experienced members of the government to really give proper input.
By putting Canadian citizens first. That's the priority. Secondly, we open our arms to immigration.
I like the town hall concept. I think that there should be many more opportunities seeking Canadians' input, definitely, but with great consideration.
Anyone making decisions in an ivory tower type scenario is not a good sort of decision-making process. You have to listen to the constituents, but you also have to listen to the reality of the situation. You also have to look at our global place, in the world, but also the needs on what it means to be Canadians nationally, and how we govern ourselves economically, right? So it's a really difficult balance between a lot of different influential forces into prioritizing what our primary needs are, right? And at the end of the day, you can only pick a few to really focus on. So again, it has to be about how do you gain diversity of perspectives and ideas towards that decision-making process, and how do you make it a holistic approach? So again, trying to remove polarization of any one side or any one cause or belief. It's really a balance of perspectives and the balance of diversity of the country and the diversity of all the influential pressures that are being applied to Canadians right now. So that's a very difficult thing. And I feel sorry for any government, any side who's placed in that position, because at the end of the day, they have to make incredibly difficult choices. So on any side.
The Government of Canada's priorities have clashed most profoundly this summer in Alberta. Energy, climate, and reconciliation are all enormously important to the people and politics in that province.
I feel Canada's top priorities are pipelines, and also make sure that they're operating properly, monitored properly, and make sure they're not leaking.
Okay.
Come on, girl.
Okay.
Go to work.
Let's go.
Hi, I'm Davis Cunningham. I am part of the Peavine Métis settlement, and this is where we've been doing the training for the canines. I live in the Seal Lake area. There's lots of heavy oil. There's light oil. There's natural gas lines. There's all kinds of pipelines where I live.
My name is Ron Mustafa, and I'm the head instructor here for the Indigenous Pipeline Monitoring Group. We'll follow you.
In the northern community, I had dogs all my life. Her name is Baby. She's a wonderful dog. She's a beautiful dog. She's really smart, actually, and she's everything I expected, I guess. The dog is trained to search for oil, gas, diesel, condensate, and stuff like that. It's what it's trained to do. Find a leak in the pipeline is basically what it's.
Okay, keep moving forward, because she's getting that nice depth, search depth.
Well, they say pipelines are the safest way to transport like oil and gas, and they are. And if they do leak, to find the leak right away and fix the problem and continue on, and less and less environmental impact.
See, she wasn't digging before. Look at her. Look at her. It works where the dog digs, that's where they dig. The companies do not have to go anywhere else on that line but that spot. It's within a meter, so the accuracy is really high. Good, that's it. We can get the Indigenous people involved like they want to be involved, and they should have been involved years ago, where they're doing consultation talks. And this way, when they're right there at the table and they say, we do this already, now they're part and parcel with the oil and gas industry. And as Canadians, this is really important.
Everybody's concerned right now about the environment. The environment is number one, because if it goes into the water, well, if we don't have water, you don't live. You know, that's just the way it is. It's the bottom line.
Let's talk about Canada's resources and the path to reconciliation. More specifically, let's talk about the Trans Mountain Pipeline.
Why doesn't the Prime Minister just say the truth and tell the Indigenous peoples that he doesn't give a about their rights?
My fellow Albertans, we face a serious situation. I'm here before you to tell you how we are defending you, your resources, your jobs, and the future of our province and country.
Currently, Alberta is forced to sell its oil at a discount to the Americans because of a lack of pipeline capacity. This discount is believed to cost the country approximately $15 billion annually. But the controversial pipeline expansion, which has been in the works for more than 6 years, was so politically contentious that its parent company, Kinder Morgan, threatened to back out of it altogether, even though it had received regulatory approval. So, the federal government stepped in and bought the line for $4.5 billion.
Our government's position is clear. It must be built, and it will be built.
Trans Mountain has survived dozens of court challenges against it, but this one was different. This one was brought forward by several First Nations groups who had problems with how the federal government consulted with them. And according to the court, the government failed.
We're winning. At the beginning, I remember people saying, this is a David and Goliath fight. And it's true. The spirit of the people that I feel behind me was too big.
And the courts have acknowledged a duty to consult, but won't go so far as to give any First Nations a veto power over their lands, ceded or otherwise. Canada's future depends on this, and these carefully balanced priorities can sway votes.
The next federal election is scheduled for October 2019, but it could happen sooner. In the province of Quebec, the election is well underway and the promises are rolling in. From higher wages, faster internet, more doctors, these platform pillars are aimed at swinging the vote and setting the tone in the province.
If re-elected, we will increase the number of super clinics, provide free dental care, invest in our teachers and healthcare workers, and keep our economy rolling.
I want to build a strong Quebec within Canada. You're no longer forced to choose between Quebec and Canada, the PQ and the Liberals.
Our founder, René Lévesque, is my guide. Although our commitment is ironclad that we won't hold a referendum in the first mandate, I strongly believe, like him, that Quebec is unique and should be independent.
For too long, elections have been about more of the same. More cuts for you, more money for the big corporations and the super rich.
How important are campaign promises?
It's a really good question. Actually, to me, it doesn't really matter because most of the time they don't even keep them. So it's not a big issue for me or a big concern.
Super important, yeah.
Why is that?
We get to know the candidates that are writing in each ridings, and gives us an idea of the human behind the signs that we see everywhere. Yeah, I follow it closely.
They are important, but I feel that they are just telling these things for the campaign, and that bothers me. I would like the parties, especially the one that is governing at the moment, to have done some of these things before. When they say this thing is important, but why wasn't it important before? So I feel a little bit irrité, how do you say that?
Irritated.
Irritated, a little bit, yeah.
C'est pas important parce que j'y crois pas vraiment. J'y crois pas aux promesses électorales, donc c'est pas important. C'est pas quelque chose sur lequel je vais me baser.
Well, they're important, it's sure, but I think what the parties stand for is like the valeurs.
Values?
The values are more important because you can promise a lot of things, but it doesn't change what you represent, what you are like as a party. So I look a lot more in those things than in the promises to vote.
Ah ben, pour moi, elles sont toujours importantes. L'idéal, ce serait qu'elles soient respectées.
When an election comes, then they listen to the people. And then they start changing their policies to suit the electorate so as they can get elected.
So that changes what they say are priorities.
Absolutely. Elections are great for democracy. Change them every 3 or 4 years. Throw them out. You know, if they're not doing the job, get rid of them.
We saw in Ontario, for instance, with the upcoming election, we saw the Wayne government reset their agenda and really try to appeal to young voters. I can see the Trudeau government doing the same, but only time will tell, I guess.
Like everything that's happening, like I feel like this year and whatever will be happening next year is all towards like getting more votes. I think every move that like a sitting federal government makes is to make sure they get reelected or they're back in office the next year. I do believe I just try whenever you watch this, I try to see, okay, are they trying to do some good for the people or for the citizens of the country? Yeah, okay, we can support that or not. But usually every party, I feel, has like any move they make is always for re-election. I don't think it's usually, like this will be good for like people. I don't think they think objectively. It's always subjective.
The priorities? I think the election is they set their priorities on what will get them re-elected. I don't know how else it would affect it. I mean, we've seen that 20 times or more, right? They'll change their mind just to to please the voters for that time.
How many federal ridings are there in Canada?
I think it's like 253. It's like 200.
328. 100? 130. 130. We'll go with 130.
35?
Oh gosh, I don't know. My guess would be 430 something.
300.
Here's a map of all the ridings in Canada. Maybe just take a look at that first, and then we'll try another answer.
Okay. I still maintain my first answer, 21. I'm very confident about my answer.
How many federal ridings are there in Canada?
338.
It is 338.
It is 338.
Fist pump. There are 338 federal ridings in Canada. They're also known as electoral districts. The boundaries are decided by an independent commission in each province, and they change based on shifting and growing populations. Each riding in a province should contain roughly the same number of people living within it, but there is other criteria for making a riding as well. Each riding elects one member of Parliament. Ontario has the most ridings at 121, and each territory has one riding and one member of Parliament. 30 new ridings were created shortly before the 2015 election to account for a larger population. It was the biggest increase since Confederation. To learn more about your riding, take a virtual road trip on route338.ca. That's the CPAC website, where you'll find more information, photos, videos, and an interactive map on every federal riding in Canada. Canadians may be divided on the issues, whether it's immigration, energy, or gun control, but we all have an equal voice in this democracy. Your MP has their own priorities as well, but they can earn or lose your vote depending on what they do here in the seat of government. So now we hand it over to you. What should be your MP's priority this year?
Oh, that's hard to say. Nobody thinks the same. Well, for me, it's the environment, and also social rights are super important. And it's not every party that care about these issues. So,
for me, environment, education, and equity, social equity, that would be very important. Yeah, social equity. For example, for the elders, social equity, the youth, women, the poorest, that's quite important. And environment, first of all.
But I know this is an answer that many people give, but it's true. It's just true that even if in other provinces and other countries the people pay even more for their education, I do not care if we have to compare ourselves. What do we want as a people? We want lower education fee. We want better education, a quality education. That's a priority for me, because intelligent people make intelligent decisions and choices, and we can go forward with that.
Thanks for watching this episode of Outburst on the Cable Public Affairs channel. Next week, we'll be exploring how open can or should our borders be to those seeking asylum. Do you have a story to tell or a strong opinion? We'd love to hear from you. You can find us on social media or send us an email at outburst@cpac.ca. It's your turn to speak up, and we're listening. Here's what some of you had to say so far.
We were very, very scared. We had no idea what to expect. You know, we were saying we could be arrested.
Are we prepared to receive all of these people? Are we prepared?
You know, I'm here, so if it takes me to be arrested, okay, you know, because at the end of the day, you are here to get safety.
We should be taking refugees. Like, I can't see us not. You look at America, they forgot that, you know, what did the Statue of Liberty say? Give us your hungry and your poor and your huddling masses, and we should be doing the same. America forgot about it, we shouldn't.
It's becoming a political, or it has become a political hot potato in Canada as well. And I fear the kind of factions that we're seeing in the United States are also showing up in Canada. So we have politicians playing to those constituencies.
You cannot sit and wait for yourself to, you know, safety to come to you. You have to go and seek it.